What if you had a park where you had one coaster from each manufacturer and that's all the roller coasters you had? What coaster from each manufacturer should you add to make a complete coaster lineup? Well, I've answered one of life's biggest questions in this video. Let's jump in. B&M has a lot of good options, but I ended up choosing one that may surprise you a little bit, their invert model. Allow me to explain my reasoning. Every good park needs a coaster that hangs under the track for variety and a multi-looper. A B&M invert is both. These coasters are typically smooth, popular, and enthusiasts like them as well. I think this is a scenario where you can't really go wrong with a coaster from B&M, but I think the invert was a good choice. For Chance Rides, it's their Hyper GTX model, and this probably isn't a surprise for anyone. This coaster is relatively small, but it provides a lot of ejector airtime, and you can never have too much ejector airtime in a given park. Another thing that made this choice easier is when you look at the rest of Chance Rides' catalog. There's going to be family coasters later on to complete our lineup, but as far as thrill rides go, this is the best one for Chance. And I would love to have this coaster at my park. Great Coasters International builds wooden coasters exclusively, but the question was, which one? Well, I chose a GCI Twister. These wooden coasters are very good. They are approachable to families, but also satisfy the thrill seekers, assuming they're smooth. This is pretty much GCI's specialty at this point. They are able to make coasters with very twisted layouts, mixing airtime, laterals, and usually good pacing. And in addition to that, I really like the Millennium Flyer trains they use, which is a minor thing, but still worth noting. So yeah, there's the standout wood coaster. As far as Gerstlauer goes, there were a couple of options I could have gone with, but I ended up choosing the Infinity Coaster model. Like the B&M invert, these coasters are multi-loopers, but they're very different. Infinity coasters have lap bars instead of over-the-shoulder restraints, and they of course have the very unique element of the vertical lift hill and beyond vertical drop. These drops provide super airtime, especially if you sit in the back of the train. Granted, those trains are typically pretty short. Ultimately, from what I've seen, this is the best option for Gerstlauer. Speaking of wooden coasters, the Gravity Group is up next, and we're finally branching out to the family coaster realm with their family wooden coasters. Not gonna lie, these things look really fun, but they're so small. Gravity Group has done a fantastic job making rides that are fun and approachable for kids and families, while also making a coaster enthusiast look forward to riding them. To be honest, before the Gravity Group, kids' wooden coasters were kind of a joke. But with the Gravity Group, this is a coaster everyone wants to ride, not just the kids. There are literally so many coasters I could have gone with for Intamin, and I highly consider their multi-launch coasters like Velocicoaster. But in the end, I made a tough decision and went with their Mega Coaster. Having an airtime-centered hypercoaster is a great thing for a theme park's lineup, and now we've got one. If the newer Mega Coasters by Intamin show us anything, it's that there are some very interesting maneuvers that you can throw in there. This coaster isn't necessarily a 200-foot tall hypercoaster with airtime, it's a 200-foot tall hypercoaster with airtime with possibly, I don't know, a dive loop. And it would undoubtedly be one of the best rides in the entire park. Mack Rides time, and not surprisingly, I'm not going with the Wild Mouse. I'm of course going with their Extreme Spinners. I mean, was there ever really any doubt? I don't even think I have to talk about these coasters very long. They have so much hype behind them at this point, even though there's only a few of them in the entire world. Here's the gist of it. Take a normal Mack Rides launch coaster with airtime, inversions, and some other maneuvers, and then make the car spin. If that sounds insane, that's because, well, it is. And this ride model has paid off for Mack Rides, as even though there's only been a couple of them built, they've been popular and people come from all over the world to ride them. A smashing success, and a great addition to the park we're building. Premier Rides is good at one thing and one thing only, launch coasters. And from what I've seen, one of the best ones appears to be their dueling launch coaster, West Coast Racers at Six Flags Magic Mountain. So I would want a dueling Premier Rides launch coaster in general. It doesn't necessarily have to be a clone of West Coast Racers, just something similar. It's always fun to have a dueling coaster to provide that sense of competition. It's also pretty cool to watch from an off-ride perspective to see the trains interacting and crossing over each other. But possibly the best part about this dueling element is the fact that you are guaranteed to duel on every single ride. This, of course, is achieved by that pit stop feature, and whenever train is ready to go, you launch into the second half of the ride. It's brilliant. This is a great coaster to round out the lineup, not only because it has launches, airtime, and inversions, but also, and mainly, that dueling feature. Now, for the best of the best, RMC. You can pretty much go with anything from this company, but I'm going to go with a ground-up hybrid coaster similar to Zadra. Quite simply, this looks like one of the world's best coasters, and Zadra specifically has insane, and I mean insane, pacing. There's a lot of rides I think that would compete for the best ride at this park, but ultimately this may be the best one. These coasters can really do it all. They're huge firstly, but secondly, they provide unbelievable ejector airtime and well-placed inversions. From someone who's only been on a couple RMCs, I can't imagine how awesome these coasters are. I'm legitimately so excited to get on one of these ground-up hybrid coasters in the future, because it's not often that you get an opportunity to go on one of the world's best rides. On a much smaller note, for SPF Visa, it's gotta be their Figure 8 spinning coasters. This is another spinning coaster, yes, but it's a great kids ride. As far as introductory spinning coasters are concerned, these have got to be the best ones on the market. And if you wanted to, you could add that hamster wheel feature to make it a little more thrilling for older guests. With Skyline, it's time to get ourselves, I think, a good kids coaster, this time a dueling one. If you're looking for unique kiddie coasters, look no further. Not only are these kiddie coasters by Skyline single rail, which is very unique in and of itself, but they are also dueling, as I said, which provides a great feature. Add on to that the fact that the track can light up and you got yourself a very intriguing ride. Or technically rides, I guess you could say. Now it's time to see how successful these are going to be at the Six Flags parks that are getting them this year. For S&S, I'm going with the biggest wild card on this entire list. To add a truly standout ride to our park, let's go with the S&S Axis Coaster. It's really tough to describe this coaster model that hasn't been built yet, because it's so incredibly unique. I'm still wondering how some of the stats would count for this coaster, like inversions. Is it how many times your vehicle goes upside down, like an SS Free Spin, or is it how many times the track goes upside down? Another thing I'll mention is that in the park we're constructing, one of the bigger gaps in our lineup is going to be a powerful launch, but with an S&S Axis coaster, you can fill that need. Can somebody please build one of these? The potential is matched by few other models ever. And shout out to S&S, because this is one of the most creative ride designs I've ever seen in my entire life. Just think of what you could do with this thing, it's unbelievable. For a while, Vekoma was pretty much headband inducing looping coasters and coasters for Disney. But what we've seen from this company has been so encouraging lately. Possibly the best of these new coasters is their Bermuda Blitz model highlighted with Lek Coaster. This ride is really said to do everything, and I've also heard it's very intense. There have been a couple of rides like this today that combine airtime, inversions, and steep drops. Here's another one. But of course, despite having those things in common, all the rides we've talked about are very different. The Bermuda Blitz may be the most intense of the bunch though. I did think about doing something more like Abyssus, a multi-launch coaster, but in the end I went with a Bermuda Blitz. Alright, it's time for Zamperla, a company that pretty much specializes in spinning Wild Mouse coasters at this point. That being said, I am going with a spinning coaster, but not the traditional Wild Mouse. I'm going with their new freeform spinning coaster model, and specifically similar to the one going to Cedar Point this year. This coaster still has that spinning element, but it has a lot more variation in the rest of the layout, so you don't know exactly what's going to happen on every single turn. I also imagine it's a pretty smooth experience, and a great family coaster as well. And yes, I know, this makes 3 spinning coasters in the park we're building, but that being said, I feel like with Zamperla there isn't a whole lot to choose from. So, here we are. Last one is Zier, and I consider their Tivoli coaster model, but ultimately I decided on the ESC, standing for Elevated Seating Coaster model. This is somewhat similar to a Tivoli coaster, but I think definitely an upgrade. And this is more of that traditional family coaster that we've kind of lacked up to this point. From everything I've seen, these coasters seem like very solid attractions for kids and families. It's certainly not a crazy way to end out the list, but it's not a horrible way to end out the list either. So there you have it, 1 coaster from each manufacturer, and I think we made a heck of a lineup. Sadly, of course this lineup does not exist in real life, but if it did, I'd be booking a ticket ASAP. If you added some theming, then maybe this could be the best park in the world. But anyways, thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you next time.